And good afternoon, and welcome to a special edition of Truth to Power. And we are located in the phenomenal city of Highland Park, Michigan, under the auspices of the Honorable Mayor, Glendon McDonald. And we are televising also in the phenomenal city of Detroit, Michigan, also under the auspices of the Honorable Mayor, Mike Duggan. I'm your host, Darwin Griffin, and we have a very special 1 hour edition of Truth to Power today with the Honorable Congresswoman Elissa Slotkin. So I don't want to really waste time because I know that our viewing audience would like to get more of an opportunity to get acquainted with Congresswoman Slotkin in this conversation. So I would like to welcome Congresswoman Slotkin to the station today. Mr. R.J. Watkins, Mr. Henry Tyler, Mr. Maxine Willis, we welcome you with open arms to come and have this conversation with us in Highland Park today.
Thank you.
But first, I'd like to ask you, Congresswoman Slotkin, tell us a little bit about who is Elissa Slotkin.
Yeah. Thanks for having me. I appreciate the time and just working with you all. So, I'm running to be the next senator of Michigan, one of our open Senate seat here that Debbie Stabenow is decided not to run for. But I'm a third generation Michigander, grew up here. My family had a business actually in Detroit called High Grade Foods. Some people might remember some of the old plants. You still have the High Grade Deli around that was on Michigan Avenue, and it was across the street or kitty corner from our hot dog plant. We were in the hot dog business.
Right.
And so that was a family business, 3 generations was in the family business. And we also had a beef cattle farm out in Holly, Michigan. So in my early life, I grew up on that farm. Then my parents got divorced. I moved around the suburbs of Detroit. But I did not want to go into the hot dog business. That wasn't my destiny. And I'm a national security person by training. And it's all, frankly, because I happened to move to New York City to go to graduate school. And the second day of graduate school was 9/11. Who knows what I'd be doing if it weren't for us being attacked on our soil. It changed my life, changed my perspective. I ended up knowing I was going to go into national security, went into the intelligence community, did 3 tours in Iraq alongside the military. So spent the better part of my 20s and early 30s going back and forth. And I was an apolitical person, frankly. Anyone who served, who's listening, knows that it's actually weird and taboo to ask someone who's serving, like, how do you vote? Who are you voting for? What's your political leaning? If you're in Baghdad in a dangerous, convoy, I don't care how you vote. I care if you're ready, if you're rested, if you've cleaned your weapon. So I was apolitical for the better part of, 16 plus years as a professional. And only thought about politics for the first time in the 2016 cycle. I had worked for whoever was my commander in chief. I had the honor of working under President Obama. I was there the Friday the Bush left office and the Monday that Obama came in. Did the same job on his national security staff. Got to know him. He was one of the toughest bosses that I ever had. Briefing him in the Situation Room and staffing meetings for him in the Situation Room, traveling with him. And got to know him well enough that he nominated me to be an Assistant Secretary of Defense at the Pentagon. So I was running a big 700-person office when the election of Donald Trump happened in 2016. Came back home, my last day in office. I was an Obama person at that point, so my last day in office was the day that Trump was sworn in. Came home to Michigan and was looking for a job, like what was my next phase of life going to be, and went to my first political meeting of my life. Mm-hmm. So that's the sort of origin story of how I got to running for office. And I was part of that wave year in 2018, that first election after President Trump had been elected, where we flipped the House of Representatives and I won in a seat that I currently represent, Lansing and the areas around Lansing.
Well, you've had a lot of experience in the political arena, but my question I want to ask you is that would you consider yourself an elected official or a public servant?
I think they're the same thing. You take an oath of office when you serve at the White House. You take an oath of office when you serve at the Pentagon. Mm-hmm. You take an oath of office when you serve as an elected representative. I mean, you literally put your hand up and quote from the Constitution. I mean, so to me, I've taken that oath many times now, and it's the same thing. And I think, in particular, working as an elected representative, you know exactly who your bosses are, and that is the people who elected you. There's no, at the Pentagon, you've got a leader, a commanding general, someone who's in charge of your unit or your office. When you're an elected representative, it is quite literally the people you represent. So I see this as a complete, consistent public service, just like those days after 9/11 when I went ahead and joined up.
Okay. Now, what qualifies you then to run for the Senate seat since you've been a congresswoman for the past few years?
Yeah. So look, when our senior senator decided not to run, Debbie Stabenow, I mean, look, let's give credit where it's due. She's served Michigan for 50 years straight in some form or fashion. And she decided she wanted another chapter, and she announced she wasn't going to run again. I thought really hard about whether I wanted to run, because I think it's important to have an affirmative, positive reason why you're running, not just point at the other guy and say they're terrible, they're bad,
right,
etc. So I'm running basically for a mix of substance reasons and style reasons. I think for me, my existential issue is that America has to be a place where anyone from anywhere can get into the middle class and beyond. I think it's a security issue for us if we don't have a strong middle class. So those are the kind of kitchen table things that I've worked on that I think make me qualified for the Senate seat, is that I have the receipts from my time as a congresswoman for the past 5.5 years, working on things that have brought manufacturing home to Michigan. I mean, we've got 44 new factories being built in the state of Michigan right now after 40 years of not a single new factory. That's because we made a policy, an industrial policy, and put money behind it to bring home manufacturing from places like China. So it's the substance side, but then I would say also the style side, right? Somehow, if I get elected, I would be the youngest Democratic woman in the Senate. I'm not young, I'm young for the Senate. But I don't think it's just age. I think that a different generation of leaders understands that we need to have more strategy if we're going to protect our rights and our democracy. We got to play offense. There's no such thing as a defense-only strategy in sports or a defense-only strategy at the Pentagon protecting the country. So why do we accept a defense-only strategy when it comes to protecting our rights and our democracy in the world that we live in? And the Senate needs to adapt. We don't have the Supreme Court there to be a backstop against crazy things. So the Senate needs to be more strategic and play more offense on protecting our rights and our democracy. Those are things I understand in my bones, and I think hopefully make me qualified to be the next senator from Michigan.
So are you familiar with the SWOT analysis?
The SWOT analysis.
Like the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats?
No, but I love it. I love an acronym. I love a good acronym.
I do too, and that's the reason why I brought that up. But I wanted you to think about, what are the strengths that Michigan has? What are their weaknesses? What are the opportunities? And then what are the threats that face the state of Michigan?
Love it. I'm going to steal this from you if that's okay. So
you're welcome to.
Our strengths, I mean, absolutely the strength of the state of Michigan is the diversity that we have in our state. And I mean that very literally. So whether it's the fact that we have a bunch of significant cities, of course, Detroit being number one, but Grand Rapids, we have cities of Flint and Saginaw, Bay City, Traverse is coming up in the world. So we have cities. Then we have strong suburbs. And then we got a lot of rural areas. You know, we're 10 million people, and a lot of our areas are very rural. Very few states have that kind of diversity of economy. And it's whether it's manufacturing and doing very industrial things, or farming, which is a big part of our economy. We just kind of have it all. It's why we're a swing state. It's why we're interesting. And that is, to me, a strength. I'm going by your acronym. Weakness, right? The weaknesses. Right. Our weaknesses is that we're losing population. Michigan has to decide. We're 10 million people right now. Are we okay shrinking to 8 million? Or do we want to grow to 12 million? And I think the answer is growth, right? And that means we need to attract new people, new businesses, new opportunities here. We need to be a place where people say, oh, I want to live in Detroit. I want to live in Grand Rapids. I want to live in Michigan, a rural area of Michigan. And then we have to keep more of our young people here, right? Give them the opportunities that allow them to thrive and start their own businesses, be entrepreneurial and be successful here. But we can already feel it, right? We all know that we have shortages in 5 core professions in our state. The professions that hold up the world: teachers and educational professionals, nurses, mental health professionals, fire and first responders, and police. We have deep shortages on those things, and that's because of that population loss and because of a whole bunch of issues. But we got to incentivize more people to go into those careers, because as we get older as a state, we need all of them. As we want to attract new people, we got to have good schools. So to me, our weakness is that we've been, over the years, losing population. We got to change that. And Detroit, for the first time in many years, just had population growth by a couple thousand. So we're like, the potential is real. Sorry, tell me your
opportunities.
The opportunities, I mean, look, one of my proudest moments was the draft, the NFL draft. Getting all these people who came from outside the state showing off Detroit. I mean, I felt like I was like high on something. I mean, I got to walk behind people who had like the Bears jerseys on, or they had jerseys from other states. So you knew they weren't Michiganders. And they were like, man, look at this place. Look at how awesome this is. And rents are half of what they are in Chicago. And I'm like, yes, we have it. But Michiganders, we tend to be like head down, work hard, do your thing, don't brag on yourself kind of people. And we need to do a little bit more bragging on ourselves, because we have a lot to offer. So the opportunities to attract people are real. And then what's your T?
What are the threats?
Threats. Well, look, I think the things that hold us back are not hard to identify. The number one killer, let's talk about protecting our children. The number one killer of children under 21 in America is gun violence. In our communities, in our schools, by suicide, and by accident. And when I was growing up, I'm 48, number one killer of children in America was car accidents, right? Because we didn't wear seatbelts. We didn't have car seats. Child would fly out the front window even in a minor accident. Society should be able to go after the number one killer of children. It shouldn't be political. So we got to deal with that issue. And one of the major ways we deal with that is opportunity. Giving people hope and expectation and an understanding that they're on a path, so that the attraction of some of that violence just isn't there. That's part of it. It's not the whole thing, but it's part of it. The other threats to us on the sort of different end of the spectrum is, look, we are the stewards of the Great Lakes. It's our job to make sure that we preserve the Great Lakes. And if we are not watching, things like our water quality, right? I mean, Michiganders care about our water, especially after Flint.
Absolutely.
So there are threats sort of clear and easy to see, like gun violence. And then there are threats like the drinking water you're feeding your child, and the water that you swim in, and the water that you paddle in. So I think that there are a number of things. And then lastly, though, to me, the biggest threat is that it's become harder and harder for someone to get in and stay in the middle class, right? And Michigan literally invented the middle class. We invented this concept, radical at the time, that if you work hard in an auto plant, you can afford the car that you were building. You could have a little place up north. You could take the kids to Disneyland. You led a solid middle class, secure life. It's become much harder to get in. And then a lot of people in our state, maybe dad and granddad were in the middle class, but they have fallen out. And in a diverse country like ours, multiracial, multi-ethnic experiment, we got to be a place where you can live that American dream if you work hard, or else people it's just not, we're not going to be safe. We're going to be at each other's throats. We're going to be desperate. So to me, that's why that's an existential issue for me, because without that, this country is at risk.
Well, and you mentioned about the Great Lakes.
Mm-hmm.
And I know that was something that the current senator, that was one of her projects that she really worked very hard at, during the time that she was our senator. But what is your thoughts, and give your impressions about Line 5?
Yeah. Line 5, the pipeline that goes underneath the Mackinac Straits right now. Look, I've been very open. The current Line 5 is way older than its expected lifespan. It's at risk. It goes right under one of the most sensitive areas in our state, and it should be shut down, right? If something's supposed to last 50, 60 years and it's now at 60 plus, we've already had an anchor strike, so a boat went by, dropped its anchor, cut that pipeline. I think we need to remember, and I think about it from my days at the Pentagon, you think of the risk of everything. You are always assessing risk. And when you think about what an oil spill would do in the Mackinac Straits, it would just pollute and make toxic our beaches from Mackinac through Lake Michigan, Lake Huron. It just, our tourism economy, our responsibility. So immediate shutdown. And then as a federal representative, I've worked really hard that if we're going to put anything there as a replacement, there needs to be proper federal oversight, not environmental rubber stamping, not just, hey, sure, let anything go under our straits. You know, we've got pipelines throughout the Great Lakes going under our lakes. There just needs to be clear oversight because the risk is to us, not to someone in Washington.
So what would you think would be the one thing that the current Senator Stabenow would like to say to a person that could be ascending into her position as a senator for the great state of Michigan? What advice do you think that she would give you?
Yeah, well, you should definitely ask her because she has lots of advice to give, which is great. And she's been a mentor to me. I represent her seat that she originally had in the House of Representatives. I'm her congresswoman, so we do spend quite a bit of time together. I think her advice, again, if I had to put words in her mouth, she's a true daughter of Michigan, right? This is everything she cares about. I think she would say no matter how crazy politics gets or Washington's gets or the international arena gets, your responsibility first and foremost is to Michigan. The question you should always ask yourself is, before I sign on to this bill, before I agree to this funding, what does it do concretely for the people of Michigan? And if you can't articulate it, that's probably not the bill for you, right? It's nice. It's nice to have, but it's not a must. She has just, I don't think people appreciate, she was the first woman representative at the federal level for the state of Michigan. And so the things she's had to put up with, I never had to put up with. I mean, I'm standing on her shoulders because she put up with a lot of crap. But she would say to me, I think, just Michigan is in, is who you are responsible to, and don't you ever forget it.
And one question before we take a break is that if your mother would give you a little bit of advice or a little bit of encouragement, what would your mother say to her daughter, Alyssa?
You're asking such good questions. I never get questions like this.
That's why we're WHPR.
Yeah, you guys you are in it. You're doing it. I appreciate it.
And we want you to come back again.
Well, you're making it easy. Gosh, why have I never had to ask that question? First of all, she never saw me run for office. She died in 2011, so I only ran for the first time in 2018. She never got to see that. My mother was really part of that first kind of original wave of feminists, or I guess the 1970s era wave of feminists who really told me, like, you can do anything. Mm-hmm. And my mother, she was a big personality. She would walk in a room and just kind of be like, I'm here, right? I mean, she would tell me, be bold. I think my mom, she had like the big sprayed up, blonde hair, the 80s, and the red lipstick, and could do her full eye makeup, drive in a car at 80 miles an hour down the lodge. I mean, she was a personality. And I was actually always more kind of serious and national security focused, kind of more buttoned up than her. She would wear her black leather jacket and walk in places. She just was constantly pushing me to be bold. And I think she would say, whatever that means now, whether you're a congresswoman, hopefully a senator, like, don't hold back, like, do what you believe in and be bold, and the world will be happy for it.
Okay. Well, we are going to take a break and we will be back with Congresswoman Elissa Slotkin. So stay tuned. We've got another half an hour to spend with you with conversations with Elissa Slotkin, and you are watching Truth to Power.
Welcome to WHPR 88.1 FM and TV 33 studios. Inside, you'll find our warm and comfortable guest lobby. For our corporate radio and television meetings, this is our executive boardroom. And for our radio shows, here's our newly renovated radio station, WHPR 88.1 FM. Broadcasting from Detroit, Highland Park, Michigan, where we welcome you to have your own radio show. Just call us at 313-868-6612. Block time is available. We're a versatile station, streaming on the World Wide Web from our radio station at www.fm881whpr.com. Walk with me down the hall to Studio B, where we broadcast live and tape our talk shows on UHF TV 33. Here's our main control room for TV 33. We also have a fully operational kitchen for luncheons and meetings. This is our brand new Virgin Islands studio, boasting live audio and video capabilities. Also on site is our 199-foot broadcast tower. Let's talk about our movie studio, Studio A, the home of Studio 33. It's designed for video shoots, photography sessions, plays, receptions, rehearsals, and concerts. The facilities boast a 35-foot ceiling, a 15-foot garage door, and Studio A is 4,000 square feet in size, with 2 endless sight walls, 3 portable screens including a green screen. Located at 166 Victor Street in Highland Park, we have gated and well-lit private parking also on the premises. For anyone interested in any of our many amenities, give us a call at 313-868-6612. That's 313-868-6612, or email us at rjwatkinstv33@live.com. Henry Tyler, Vice President, RJ Watkins, CEO.
And welcome back to Truth to Power. And we are having a conversation today. This is a special edition of Truth to Power. And we are having a conversation today with the Congresswoman, and her name is Elissa Slotkin. And we are very, very proud to have her on Truth to Power today with us to get a little opportunity to get more acquainted with her and who she is and why she wants to get your support to be the next next senator from the great state of Michigan. But during the break, I know Congresswoman Slotkin, we were talking a little bit about the opportunities that the vice president or presidential candidate now, Kamala Harris, is looking at having to make a very, very wise decision to run against the Republican candidate and his vice presidential candidate. But what are your thoughts in terms of, say, the people that have been put out that's on the short list for Vice President Harris to consider for that VP spot?
Well, look, I mean, we've all gone through so much change in the past 2 weeks. It's like, it's almost breathtaking. I'll be honest, the single best thing I could ever recommend is to have Gretchen Whitmer as the vice president. I mean, she says she doesn't want it, and I know, talk about bold choices. To have 2 women on the ticket would be a choice. It would be a bold choice.
But history is being made, and I don't call it history. I say her story is being made. So this could be the same with you. It could be your story.
Yeah. I mean, look, so nothing would be better for Michigan, right? I mean, the governor is very popular here. And so, of course, lots of conversations going on across the country. But the governor has been pretty clear that that's not her path right now. She wants to stay in Michigan. And
right.
The good news is there's just there's a bench now. I think the fact that we're even talking about multiple candidates and a bunch of governors and senators and the whole thing, like the Democratic Party has a bench in a way that I haven't seen in a long time, if ever, right, in my lifetime. I'm friendly with a number of them. Senator Mark Kelly is someone that I have served with. He's the astronaut, right? Yeah, the astronaut and former Navy pilot. Mm-hmm. He's married to Gabby Giffords, who's a victim of gun violence. She was just here in town in Michigan. So. But look, there's governors, Beshear, Shapiro, Waltz, who have all done good jobs. So the truth is, if it's not Gretchen, then we will work well with whoever is picked. But I think for Michigan, it's sometimes hard to remember, but we are a swing state because you need base Democratic voters to come out. Or if you're Republican, you need base Republican voters to come out. And then you need to win a majority of that independent group. And so, we always think about the base and the independents. Right. And so I hope that whoever's making these final recommendations is thinking about that too.
Do you have a choice in particular as to who outside of? Because I think the thing is that some people are saying that it shouldn't be a senator, but it should be a governor. Mm. And then they're looking at the demographics when it comes down to where in proximity in the United States that this person should come from. But I think it's just interesting that here, Michigan was really being in the front of candidates that were being looked upon. And it was up to our current governor to make the determination that this was something that she wanted to let somebody else take that stage.
I mean, I think beyond being willing to be team captain for Gretchen Whitmer, I'm just kind of learning myself about all these different folks, and I'm going to work with whoever gets picked. And we're about to find out, right? I mean, I could be as early as Monday that there's some announcement. I have no special knowledge of what it's going to be. They're holding it very closely. Right. But I'll work with whoever. I would have been out championing Gretchen if she desperately wanted it. Because I think she'd be so good for Michigan and for the country. But beyond that, I'm just along for the ride along with everybody else.
I got you. So how do you think that you would work with Gary Peters?
So Senator Peters and I have known each other now since 6 years since I got involved in politics. Mm-hmm. And we work well together. We understand each other. We have extremely open lines of communication. I mean, sometimes, that's people underestimate that even when you're an elected official and you get on TV from time to time, relationships still matter. Mm-hmm. The tone and tenor of those relationships. So my chief of staff works well with his chief of staff. We have a good lines of communication. And, he will be the senior senator.
Right.
And so if I manage to earn people's votes, I'm going to take my cues from him. And he's been a great leader and mentor to me already as a congresswoman.
Okay. Now, one thing that I want to ask you too is that there's a tremendous amount of dismay in Detroit with an African-American population hovering just under 80%, that for the first time in almost about 70 years, that there's no black representation from the, Detroit area at a federal level in Congress or in the U.S. Senate. So in context of your candidacy, what would you say to that aspiration and how effective that you believe that you could be in representing the people of Detroit and the state at large?
Yeah. I mean, the moment I got in the race, this has been a question. There hasn't been a conversation that I've had in Detroit or the surrounding areas, Wayne County, for the better part of 18 months where this hasn't come up. And particularly the seat that John Conyers used to hold, people feel strongly about there being more African American representation at the federal level. That no one's hidden that. To me, then it makes it twice as important, 3 times as important for me to prove myself as someone who can represent the city. And I've been open about the fact that I've been representing Lansing and the 6 counties around it, not Detroit, right? So we made it our business to come back and back and back, to meet with people, to sit with people, even if they didn't always agree with me or, know anything about me or anything, and have those conversations where, I'll be honest, people have pushed me. There's not been a conversation with a pastor or with an elected local leader who haven't pushed me on this issue. So all I can say is I was asked so frequently, like, what are you going to do for Detroiters? What are you going to do for people of color in Michigan? That I went ahead and got a group together of a bunch of Detroiter leaders, and I wrote out what we call our opportunity agenda. It's 11 points, and it is exactly what I would do for Detroiters if and when I manage to get elected. It's on my website, like it's a public document. We've had events in Detroit, Saginaw, Flint, Grand Rapids, talking about it and exposing people to it. And it's basically like writing my report card. You want to know what I will do? That's what I'll do. And so it's everything from job creation and workforce development, building Black wealth, right? Helping to secure more federal dollars and federal contracts for people of color. I mean, things that a federal representative can deeply impact. So I've tried to be responsive, when people ask me over and over, what will I do? But the other thing is that I've been very open about the fact that I will never be the candidate of color in this race. That's not possible for me. So I have to work twice as hard to learn and then to earn people's votes. So that's a learning approach is what I take to this. I'm also not afraid of a hard conversation, right? I think the difference with me being a bit of a different generation is that having tough conversations around race doesn't scare me. I don't shy away or pussyfoot around it. So that's what I've tried to do. And the one thing I can say at the end of the day is I know how to listen and I know how to fight. That is something I know how to do. So I'm hoping to earn people's votes. And in this primary that I'm in, I've been working very hard to win the city of Detroit. That has been my goal, along with winning the whole thing, of course. But I purposely, very specifically, and I'm a competitive person, I want to win the city of Detroit with my sweat equity to get there.
Okay. And basically, the other thing, too, is that the Israeli-Gaza war continues. And over 40,000 people in total have lost their lives. What should be the plan to end this war that significantly is funded by the United States? And is a 2-state solution in Israel still possible?
Well, I'll start at where you ended. A 2-state solution is required. There is no long-term peace and stability in the Middle East without a 2-state solution. That's been U.S. policy for as long as I've been alive, I think, or nearly. And it is my personal belief that unless the Palestinians have the ability to have their own country with their own government, this doesn't, the conflict may ebb and flow, but it won't ever end, okay? As for what should be done to end it, I think it's now sort of universally understood that you need a negotiated ceasefire, right? We need a deal, preferably to get the hostages back. They still have hostages, including American hostages, and then to end this portion of this very high intensity military portion of the campaign. Now, I will say over the past week, we've seen a real uptick in the risk of escalation and making this an even wider war. We've had exchanges of rocket fire and military operations between Lebanese Hezbollah into Israel and Israel back. We've had targeted assassinations go on of Hamas leaders, people who were in those negotiations. So I've been watching very closely the potential for the risk of escalation. But to me, there is no option other than a negotiated ceasefire, a deal that brings an end to this portion of this conflict, and then we can get to those long-standing issues, right? The issues that are, frankly, in many ways difficult, right? But do it when there's not an active military operation going on.
Okay. And let's talk a little bit about the borders. Last February, the U.S. Customs and Border Protection reported over 9 million border infractions have occurred during the Biden administration, 7.4 million at the southern border. Secretary Mayorkas has now publicly admitted that this serious crisis, in your view, so what do you think is the solution to this problem, and what would you and how would you address it as a U.S. Senator?
Yeah, this may surprise some people, the way that I approach this issue, but as someone who's a national security professional and spent my entire life trying to protect the homeland, I think we just have to be straight about the southern border. No one should be proud of what's going on at the southern border, and everyone's to blame. The White House, the Congress, Democrats, Republicans. We're a nation of immigrants that can't get immigration right. And here in Michigan, I mean, Detroit specifically, we know what a healthy border looks like. We know what it's like to deal with, the back and forth between two different countries. And to me, the rational people could get in a room and solve this in the better part of 45 minutes if they kick Twitter out and the media out. The answer is a couple of things. Number one, keying immigration to our economy, right? If we need more immigrants to work on our farms, legal vetted immigrants, then we should open up more visas for them to work on those farms. If we need more folks to help us keep the fudge shops open at Mackinac, then we should make sure they're legal vetted visas for them to come in. But this idea that you should come into the country by walking over the border, every country has the right to know who's coming in and what they're bringing, right? So to me, it starts by saying, we got to make it faster for you to get in through a legal vetted pathway than by walking 1,000 miles with your children over the border. And until we get that mix right, and by the way, the White House can only do so much. Congress has the real power in this issue. Those visa numbers, Congress, right? Changing our immigration system, Congress. So we had the makings of a deal going on, right? Our senators, Senator Langford from Oklahoma and Senator Murphy from Connecticut, were doing what I think most Americans want their government to do. They were Democrats and Republicans sitting in a room in a closed door figuring out a deal that they could both agree with. And then I have to say, President Trump called a halt to it. He liked the issue of border so much for his reelection that he didn't want Senator Langford to cut a deal. To make the border more safe, to figure a way out of this. So that to me is the opposite of what most Americans want. They want rational people from both sides of the aisle figuring this out. And it starts by making sure that anyone coming from Central America, South America knows better to apply from my home country than to walk across the border.
And a question that I want to ask you, because I've asked a lot of politicians in the state of Michigan this question, and I'd like to get your viewpoint on this. Do you think, we have a governor that has always talked about fix the roads. Mm-hmm. Do you think that the state of Michigan should have toll roads?
No, I do not.
And why?
I think we all understand that we've had, a real problem with our roads for many. Mm-hmm. We had a real problem with our roads for many years, and obviously, like you said, the governor made it the central portion of her, her campaign in 2018. But since then, we have voted on the largest investment in infrastructure in 50 years. I voted on it, and the infrastructure dollars that have come into the country and specifically to Michigan are why we see orange barrels everywhere, are why we have construction going on everywhere. And we all know there's fixing a road by patching it, and then you patch the same road year after year.
Again, right.
Then there's rebuilding the road so the water doesn't seep in the cracks, so that it's better able to tolerate ice. That's what we invested in. I understand that other states have tolls, like Ohio on the Turnpike, Pennsylvania on the Turnpike. That's for people driving through. But for Michiganders, so much of our lives are driving, to that job site to our kids, school, to the the sports games that they're playing. I just don't. I think we have the money through this investment, and we need to manage it properly. I just don't believe in tolls.
Okay. And looking at climate change is affecting a lot of cities and communities worldwide, with specific effects on disadvantaged communities. Mm-hmm. What is your position on our national approach to climate change, and what do you think should be done to help the urban communities?
Yeah. I'll be open about it. I wrote a paper in 2024 for the Secretary of Defense when I was at the Pentagon that called climate change a national security issue. And specifically in Michigan, the way we're seeing climate change play out here is extreme weather, right? Think about the number of tornadoes that have touched down in the past year in the state of Michigan. We've lost 9 people. I think we've had 6 touchdowns. I don't remember that many touchdowns in my entire childhood, right? And a lot of them have been in my district in the Lansing area, so I'm focused on it. Then we had a couple of summers ago, remember how much flooding we had? Just over and over and over again. Cost people a lot of money, it costs people time and effort. And of course, communities like our cities are even more susceptible to a thing like flooding, because it's not like you're in a rural area and the water can just dump into, the local pond or whatever. So I think we have a responsibility as leaders to deal with this issue. And I don't think extreme weather is going to get better unless we understand it, deal with it, and plan for it. So that's why I'm supportive of some of the big efforts to diversify away from fossil fuels. We're never going to be 100% no fossil fuels. But I come from the Pentagon. When you manage risk, you do it by having redundancy, right? I like solar. I like wind. I like nuclear. I like all of it, right? So that we have options if one fails or there's a problem with something. So I think it's part of the responsibility of elected leaders to protect our kids from the effects of climate change. And so there's been quite a bit of conversation about how do we encourage businesses, local governments to transition off of those fossil fuels.
And another question I want to ask you too is that reparations, because that's been a topic for the past several years. Yep. There's been a referendum that was put out as far as the ballot initiative for Proposal R, and it passed, to do a reparation study, in the state of Michigan, primarily in the city of Detroit. What's your thoughts about reparations?
Yeah. You know what? It's actually, I don't know if you know this is the exact right day to be talking about this issue, because later on today will be the funeral of Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee in Houston, Texas. She and I served on the Homeland Security Committee together. She was a force of nature, and she was the one who took the bill on reparations when John Conyers left the Congress. So John Conyers, our longtime congressman from Detroit, was the one who championed that bill originally, and then when he transitioned out, she picked up the ball and made it a huge issue. I don't think there's any problem studying this issue, right, and looking at it and thinking about it. I just think we need to be deliberate about it. And there is no quick fix and the quick answer on these issues. You're talking about, generations of history and misgivings and inappropriate government policy, but how you solve that problem is complicated. So the idea of studying it, which is what Detroit has been doing, I know they've had sort of fits and starts with the commission looking at this. That's, for Detroiters to consider, but looking at it, studying it, and understanding what the options are, I think is the right approach.
Okay. And we've got a few minutes left, but I want to ask you one other question too about the, when you look in terms of, say, diversity, equity and inclusion initiatives and policies that seem to be disappearing amongst corporations and the companies that employ our people. In view of the vacant Supreme Court ruling that talked about affirmative action, what policies makers really, what can be done to counter this trend?
Yeah. There's definitely been an attack on anything having to do with diversity in like every corner of the government by my colleagues across the aisle in Congress. I mean, I can't tell you, we'll be doing like a Department of Agriculture funding bill, and they'll be like, we won't fund the Department of Agriculture unless you get rid of all diversity programs. I mean, it's really going deep. They want to, everyone who works on diversity issues, they want to move their salary to $1, basically fire them. I mean, it's constant. If you look at it, actually, the Supreme Court, when they made that ruling, which obviously I disagree with, the one place they didn't touch where they said it's okay to factor in diversity is in bringing in military officers into places like our military academies, like West Point and the Air Force Academy. Why? Because if you don't have a diverse officer corps and you have a diverse enlisted corps, it's a national security issue. Mm-hmm. They said it. It's in the Supreme Court decision. So to me, we are stronger, quite literally, like in a military sense, when we have diverse perspectives leading that institution. And so that's how I approach the issue of diversity in general. It makes us stronger when it's done right. And it's a responsibility of representatives, of elected leaders, to understand and advocate for security. So to me, this is not hard to understand. And I think it's become kind of one of the, if you read the Project 2025, okay, that's a whole other conversation we could have.
That could be a long conversation.
All I'm saying is, like, if you want to understand what a second President Trump presidency would look like, Project 2025 is the map. J.D. Vance, the vice president candidate, wrote the foreword for Project 2025. So when they say, well, this isn't really what Trump will do, come on, okay? And there, what they would do on our work on promoting and supporting a diverse workforce across the country, it would be dramatic. And I think it's one of the biggest differences. I mean, when people want to know kind of differences of approach, there is a massive difference on the issue of diversity between the two parties right now.
So if Senator Slotkin, in her first year that she was in office, what would be her main priority that she would look at in that first year? Yeah.
So I think, first 3 to 6 months, I would, again, break it down between substance and style. Okay. On substance, as I said, if to me the most important thing I can do for my state is promote a strong middle class, have it growing, then the most one of the most impactful things we can do at the federal level is look at incentivizing more manufacturing coming home from places like China to Michigan. Okay. We had the CHIPS Act, right, which brought a lot of microchip production back, including in Michigan. We got to have what I call the son of chips, right? The next level down for our tier 1, tier 2 suppliers. How do we bring more supply chains home? That's more jobs for us, jobs with dignity, union jobs.
And that makes a big difference because, and our time is just about to wrap up. But I do want to say that this has been a pleasure to get an opportunity to go and have a conversation with you today. And we from Watkins Broadcasting appreciate you coming here to the station. And we definitely hope that you will come to the station more often. And we wish you well, and we hope that you will have a great rest of your campaign. And if you are the new senator from the state of Michigan, we definitely know that you will bring what you say back to the little communities like Highland Park and Detroit as well. So again, thank you, Congresswoman Slotkin, for coming on Truth to Power today. And again, you've been watching Truth to Power today. I'm your host, Darwin Griffin, and we look forward to seeing you in the very near future. Have a great rest of this afternoon. Thank you.